Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Sam from Historic Travels and welcome to another video. Now for today's video, I have a different type of topic that I want to talk about with all of you today. You see, ever since I was a small kid, there is one thing I've always wanted. I always wanted a video game that would let you experience the sinking of the Titanic from the perspective of somebody who was on board the ship. You know, you could be on board the Titanic, you could watch the rooms flood, you could be up on the boat deck and watch the sinking from there, watch the ship split in two, and so on and so forth. That's what I always wanted. However, unfortunately, when I was a kid, computer technology was nowhere near as good as it is today, and believe it or not, the internet was still in its infancy at the time that I was a little kid. How many of you out there remember dial-up and AOL and all of that? If you do remember it, please let me know in the comments below. But anyway, as of late, there are several teams out there that are trying to recreate the sinking of the Titanic in the manner that I wanted as a kid, you know? They want to recreate it in the way that lets you really experience the sinking of the Titanic from the perspective of somebody who was on board the ship. Now, one such team that is working on that is Titanic Honor and Glory. And at the time of making this video, they do have several demos up, and in these demos, you can explore the Titanic and see the Titanic and you know, get a true grasp of what being on the Titanic is like. However, they have yet to complete their sinking version of this, so we're still waiting on that. However, there's another team out there, and this team is called Maritime Interactive, who created a game for another game called Roblox. If you're not familiar with Roblox, Roblox is basically a modding community game where people can come together and create a bunch of mini games using the game Roblox. So people can come up with all of these different experiences that you can see within the game Roblox. I hope I explained that well. And anyway, Maritime Interactive created a Titanic sinking game within Roblox. So you can walk around the deck of the Titanic, watch the sinking, and so on and so forth. And their goal for that game was to be as accurate as possible in retelling the story of the Titanic within Roblox. So I thought it'd be fun for today's video to go in and check out the work of Maritime Interactive and see how accurate of a recreation of the Titanic sinking this game truly is. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. Alright, so this is the Titanic game located within the game of Roblox. Officially, this game is called Titanic SOS, and boy, let me tell you, upon first impressions, I am absolutely blown away. I cannot get over how great the Titanic looks within this game. Now keep in mind, Roblox is nowhere near as big of a game as, say, Titanic Honor and Glory is. So don't go into this game expecting Titanic Honor and Glory level graphics. However, for what the game Roblox can do, I think they absolutely knocked it out of the park with how great the Titanic looks. Now, upon looking at the menu, you see several options here. You can see play the sinking, play exploration mode, character menu, and so on and so forth. Now, play the sinking, obviously, as the title suggests, it lets you experience the sinking of the Titanic. However, what I want to do first is check out the exploration mode so I can see firsthand how well detailed the team over at Maritime Interactive was able to make the Titanic. Once you select which mode of the game you'd like to play, the game will then spawn you in at one random spot on board the Titanic. Now in this particular instance, it spawned me in on the Titanic stern section. And boy, let me tell you, I was absolutely blown away the first time I saw this. It really did look like I was standing on board the Titanic. Now you can either play this game in first person or third person. First person is when you look through the eyes of your character, and third person is when you are looking at your character from behind or in front or whatever. And as you can see here, this is what my character looks like in the third person. But for now, I'm just going to explore the ship in the first person perspective. Now, once I started exploring the ship, I spent some time exploring the Titanic's boat deck, and honestly, this was my first real amazement with the game. You know, just the level of detail they put into the Titanic's boat deck. I mean, I was blown away seeing the lifeboats, seeing the funnels. I mean, it was really cool. But the highlight for me when using exploration mode was when I started checking out the interior spaces that they recreated within this game. I checked out the wheelhouse, the navigation bridge, all incredibly detailed spaces that they created. And then I headed into the officers' quarters area and headed to the Marconi room. And honestly, the Marconi room is probably my favorite room as recreated within this game. I mean, they had the Marconi set. They even had the Titanic's radio call sign MGY on the wall. And for those of you who don't know, whenever the Titanic's wireless operators would send out a message, they would identify the Titanic as MGY. So that's the point of that. And that was a really cool detail to see. Then I headed into the Titanic's grand staircase and checked that out, and you could even walk all the way down inside the grand staircase and enter Scotland Road. That was super cool to see. So yeah, the team did a great job in recreating the interior spaces of Titanic. Now, it's important to note, they did not recreate all of the interior spaces of the ship. You know, that would be a monumental task, and that's one reason why Titanic Honor and Glory is taking so long, is just because they're trying to recreate the entire ship. But for the interior spaces that Maritime Interactive was able to recreate, they did an incredible job, and they're slowly but surely adding more spaces to the ship as time goes by. All right, well, hey, with the exploration mode out of the way, let's go check out the sinking. Now, before we jump into the sinking, there is one last detail about Titanic SOS that all of you should be aware of before you go and download this game. For the most part, Titanic SOS is strictly a multiplayer experience, which means that if you want to download this game and try it out for yourself, you will be on board the Titanic with other people running around. Now, for the most part, this is a great feature. It's really a lot of fun to walk around the Titanic with other players on board and see what they're doing and what they're up to and so on and so forth. However, for this video, that turned out to be a little bit of a problem because the players were a little too hectic on board the Titanic for me to get good footage for this video. So there is one way around the multiplayer thing, and that is to set up a private server, which is what I did for this video. And if any of you out there do want to try this game out for yourself, you have that option as well. Now, when you first start up the sinking mode of Titanic SOS, one thing you all need to be aware of is, unless you select the real-time sinking option, the regular game's sinking mode does not take 2 hours and 40 minutes to go down, just like the real Titanic did. You know, the game creators knew that most people didn't have that kind of time when it came to starting this game up for a little bit. All in all, from iceberg impact to final plunge, in the regular sinking mode, it takes the Titanic roughly 30 minutes to sink. So, in a nutshell, what that means is that while the Titanic does sink pretty accurately in the main game, it takes nowhere near as long to go down as what the Titanic really did. Alright, so when you first select Play the Sinking, you have two options to choose from. Now, in a multiplayer game, you'll have to vote on which sinking scenario you want, but where this is a private server, I can select one. You can choose between accurate sinking or 1997 movie sinking, which basically recreates a sinking from the James Cameron film. However, for this video, we are going to be doing accurate sinking because we want to see the Titanic sink just like it really did. Once you select what sinking scenario you would like, the next thing you need to do is go to the character menu and create your character. You can select whatever name you want, your bio, your character's age, your gender, and so on and so forth. Once you do all that, though, the most important thing to do is to select what class you want. You can pick if you want to be first class, second class, third class, deck crew, wireless operator, musician, so on and so forth. And each class has different roles to play on board the Titanic. For this mode, I selected crew because that's what I have the most fun doing during the sinking in this game. If you're a member of the Titanic's crew, you can launch the lifeboats from the ship, close the watertight doors on board the ship. Yes, this game has that feature as well. But yeah, each class has its own variety of things you can do, and yeah, it's a lot of fun to explore and see which class you like the best. Now, when you first start up the game, it is daytime on board the RMS Titanic. And if you're being really observant, you'll immediately notice one major historical accuracy that the team put into this game. If you pay close attention, you'll see the Titanic has a very, very slight list to port. This was because on the real Titanic, they had to move coal from the starboard side coal bunker in Boiler Room 6 to the port side. And when they did this, this caused the Titanic to have a slight 3-degree list to port. And that was recreated in this game. That is super cool, and the maritime historian in me was very happy to see this. Now, where this is a time-accelerated version of the sinking, it doesn't take that long for things to get dark. Within 2 to 3 minutes of starting up this game, the sun quickly goes down, and then, just a few minutes later, you'll slowly but surely see an iceberg appear on the horizon. Now, during the initial collision with the iceberg, I was paying close attention to everything that was going on in the game. I heard the warning bells from the crow's nest ring out when the iceberg was spotted. That was super well done. But then, as I was watching the Titanic approach the iceberg from beside the Titanic's bridge, I heard what sounded like ringing coming from the wheelhouse. And I'm like, that can't be what I think it is. So I walked into the wheelhouse to look for the source of the ringing, and what I saw completely blew my mind. I will show you it right now. Wasn't that cool? I could not believe that was in the game. They actually recreated the moment where Frederick Fleet called down to the Titanic's bridge from the crow's nest to tell them that there was an iceberg right ahead. That was so cool, and the historian in me was so happy to see that. And in case you didn't catch it, that was the same voice of the guy who played Frederick Fleet in the James Cameron Titanic film. 10 out of 10 Maritime Interactive. Very well done with that little detail. Now, in regards to the actual collision between the Titanic and the iceberg, well, that was also very well done in this game. You can see ice falling down onto the forward well deck, and man, watching that iceberg go by from the Titanic's boat deck in this game, boy, I tell you, that was a pretty eerie sight. And I think this game did an excellent job in recreating what it would have been like to be on board the Titanic at the moment of iceberg impact. Now, when you're exploring the Titanic during the sinking, it can be pretty easy to lose track of time, especially where this is a time-accelerated version of the sinking. So what the game creators did to help players out with that was, if you pay close attention to the top part of your screen while you're playing the game, you'll notice little lines of text appear that explain what's going on with the Titanic at this point in time during the sinking. So like right after the iceberg impact, you'll see some text appear that says Captain Smith ordered the engines to stop for the last time. And then a short time later, you'll see a little bit of text appear that says that steam is escaping from the Titanic's funnels, and so on and so forth. So it's a good way to keep track of where you are in the timeline of the sinking of the Titanic while you're playing the game. Now, one thing that I was keeping an eye on as I was playing through the sinking was the actual way that the Titanic was listing, because as you all know, the listing of the Titanic changed several times throughout the sinking. You know, before the iceberg impact, the Titanic was listing 3 degrees to port. Then after the iceberg impact, the Titanic began to list on her starboard side, and then around halfway through the sinking, the Titanic began to list to her port side again. And I'm happy to report that they were able to match up the listing of the Titanic pretty exactly. I was very impressed by what I saw with how the listing of the Titanic changed throughout the course of the sinking. Now, after a little bit of time exploring the Titanic during the sinking, I wanted to go down as deep as I could into the ship to see if I could spot any interior flooding. And boy, it didn't take me long to find it. As I approached E-Deck, I saw water slowly but surely coming up the stairway towards D-Deck. And then I noticed another cool feature with this game. The lights were actually flickering out as the water inside the ship got higher and higher. That was such a cool thing to see. It's another one of those really cool details that they didn't have to add, but they did to the game. And honestly, this made the whole sinking experience seem a lot more real and a lot more scary. Now, I do have one more big piece of advice for all of you, if any of you out there do decide to try this game out for yourselves, but play this game wearing headphones, because while you don't really get a sense of it by watching this video, the game creators actually did a really good job in recreating the sounds that the Titanic would most likely make during the sinking. I mean, you can hear the hull groaning, you can hear the water coming, you can hear the lights flicker and go out as that happens. I mean, it really does add a lot to the atmosphere. So if you want the best experience possible while playing this game, wear headphones. After doing a little bit more exploring, I decided to go and open up one of the Titanic's D-Deck gangway doors because I was getting ready to head up to the boat deck to begin launching some of the Titanic's lifeboats. And I thought by opening this door, this would give the Titanic's passengers another means to escape the Titanic. As long as I didn't forget to go down and shut that door, everything would be fine. Right? Right? I'm sure everything will be okay. What's the worst that could happen? Now, in regards to the whole system of launching lifeboats from the Titanic in this game, well, it's extremely cool and extremely well done. You really do have to act out all of the steps that the crew did when you try to launch these lifeboats. Everything from removing the fence to breaking the chains holding the lifeboat to the Titanic's deck, removing the cover from the lifeboat, and using the Titanic's davits to swing the boat over the Titanic's side. Extremely cool and extremely well done. And if you were in a multiplayer game of this, then there would be other players standing around this lifeboat and you would have to tell them, okay, this boat is safe to get into, hurry up and get into this lifeboat because we're about to lower away. And if you are one of the players that does try to escape the Titanic in one of the ship's lifeboats, well, the game creators tried to, as best they could, recreate the general location that this lifeboat went to during the sinking. So, no matter what lifeboat you get into in this game, it will travel to the general location that its real-life counterpart went to during the real sinking of the Titanic. After I spent a little bit of time on the Titanic's boat deck lowering lifeboats over the ship's side, I got this nagging feeling that I was forgetting something. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt like that I had done something deep inside the Titanic and that I had completely forgotten about it. I don't know. What's the worst that could happen? I'm sure it wasn't anything that important. As the sinking of the Titanic enters its final stages within the game, you'll notice that the ship's lights begin to dim. And when they dim, you'll notice that the lights begin to glow this very eerie red color. This happened in real life because as the ship continued to sink and its power was getting weaker, the lights began to dim and glow this eerie red color. This effect was masterfully recreated in this game, and it really does add a lot more detail to this sinking, and it further makes you feel like you are really on board the Titanic during the ship's final moments. Now, up until this point, we've talked about a ton of all the cool features that the team who made this game put into this. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing all the details they were able to cram into this Titanic game. However, if you all thought all of that was incredible, wait until you guys see how they portrayed the Titanic's final moments. I mean, I could literally spend 30 minutes talking about everything that they put into the final 10 minutes of the Titanic sinking within this game. But since we don't have that kind of time, I'll give you the short version. Right up to the point where the bridge of the Titanic starts to go under, they basically have the Titanic sink in real time up to that point, because as soon as the bridge goes under, the ship has roughly 10 minutes left. So that's kind of how they did it. They had the ship sink at a normal rate at that point. And boy, let me tell you, they absolutely killed it with the detail, you know? Like, they got collapsible A and B put in there, and yes, the lifeboats behave as they properly should. They got the funnels collapsing properly. That was an incredibly cool thing to see. And another thing that surprised me is just as the Grand Staircase dome is going underwater, they even were able to recreate the dome imploding as all of the water was going over the top of it. Super, super cool detail. Now, when the Titanic was about to split in two, I was paying close attention to the breakup because I was wondering how they would portray it. And when the Titanic breaks in half, they have the lights on the stern section remain on briefly after the breakup. Excellent. And they even were able to partially recreate the big chunks of superstructure that broke off after the breakup in between Funnel 3 and the beginning of Funnel 4. I mean, I could not believe that that was in the game. Super, super cool. The stern goes down the proper way, and honestly, there's very little critique I could give them about this. I mean, especially for what Roblox allows them to work with as far as the game engine and everything. Super, super cool. And if you somehow manage to avoid going into the water right up to the point where the Titanic stern goes under, well, if you're in the water for roughly somewhere between 5 to 10 seconds, your character starts to suffer from hypothermia. So that's something else you have to contend with in the game. So if you go into the water, you don't last that long, just like on the real Titanic. But yeah, overall, this game was incredible. The team that made this game did a fantastic job. 10 out of 10. And if you would like to check out the game yourselves, I will include a link to the Roblox website down below. Just go there and type in Titanic SOS and you'll easily find the game. I hope you all enjoy it. All right, everybody. Well, hey, thank you all so much for watching this video. Be sure you leave it a like. Be sure to subscribe. And hey, I will see you all in the next one. Have a great day, everybody. Well, thanks to our captain level Patreon supporter, Dakota Charbonneau. Thank you so much for all the support, man.